Hi, everybody, and welcome to Codebusters. I'm John Tobus, and today I'm going to give you a lot of information to try and help you get ready for this year's event. So a couple of things to be aware of. Codebusters, if you're not familiar with it, it is basically an event where teams are decoding encrypted messages, typically like a crypto quote that you might see in a newspaper. But there are a lot of ciphers that we use for this, things that are positional ciphers, things that are letter substitution, and even some symbol substitutions. The team is designed for up to 3 students, and this year we are going to be running everything online. The online tool has been designed to mimic what they would do on a paper test. So if someone was doing a paper test at the same time, they can, it would be no advantage over someone doing it online. We do allow the people, since the students are not necessarily going to be in the same place, we do allow them to communicate via Zoom or a conference call or whatever makes sense, just as long as it's just the communications to allow them to collaborate. But all 3 students will be collaborating on the same test online. The one other thing that they're allowed to have with them is, well, pencil and paper, obviously, and then a simple calculator, just a basic 4 or 5 function calculator, not a scientific one. So they can't use the one that's on their phone. They actually have to have a calculator for that. Let's talk about a few things that have changed this year. This event has gone on for several years. This year, one of the things we've done is we've taken and moved the rail fence cipher, which we were using for Division B. We've also brought it up to Division C, but we've added a little bit of a twist, which is there's an offset so that instead of it just being a straight zigzag, we'll talk a little bit about more, but it might be offset by an amount. So it makes it a little bit harder to solve. The RSA cipher has been removed from Codebusters, but cybersecurity is doing RSA. So we didn't want to have an overlap of the same thing in 2 events. One of the new ciphers this year is called the Porta cipher. It's actually the predecessor of the Visionaire cipher. It's a variant. It's actually a little bit easier in some respects to solve, but it's got a real nice twist to it. You've been familiar, we've had a K1 and K2 alphabet. Well, this year we're adding a K3 alphabet to use with the aristocrats and patristocrats, and I'll describe that a little bit more. But one important thing is when solving an aristocrat or patristocrat, instead of asking for the students to give us what the answer is, what instead we're going to ask them is to give us what the key phrase or the keyword was that was used to construct the alphabet for encoding the cipher. It means that they might actually figure out the whole cipher, but they're going to have to understand what the alphabet is and understand how it was constructed and how it was encrypted. And also, in order to provide encouragement to solve more ciphers than just the aristocrats and patristocrats, we've introduced a special bonus questions. They're going to be up to 3 questions on the test that are marked, and they're going to provide a bonus of 150, 450, or 750 points. So the way that works is it's not going to be an aristocrat, patristocrat, or xenocrypt. It's going to be something else, like a Baconi or some of the other unusual ciphers. And when they solve it, they have to solve it so that they would have gotten the full amount with no penalty points. So that means, 2 mistakes on a Baconian or 0 mistakes when they're doing the Hill decryption matrix. So if they would have gotten the full score, then it counts as having solved it. And if they solve, so if assuming there's 3 of them marked on the test, if they solve any one of them, it doesn't matter which one it is, they will get a 150-point bonus. But if they solve 2 of them, they get a 450-point bonus. And if they solve all 3 of them, that's a full 750-point bonus. That's a big difference in terms of what gets added to the score. To give you an idea of all the ciphers, this gets just get a view. Things that we've added, we have the Porta cipher, that's a new one. But you can see a little bit of we're trying to move people, between the different A, B, and C divisions so that we have some continuity as someone that's done it in a previous, when they've done lower grades, when they go in the higher grade, they have some familiarity. And so when we look at all the ciphers, there's a lot of options on there. We've got the aristocrats and patristocrats, which are the alphabetic substitution. That basically is 1 letter for 1 letter. Visionaire, Caesar, all of those are alphabet substitutions, but they have different rules by which they are substituted. The affine is really an encryption cipher. That's where there's some math that they're doing in order to translate it. Baconian, I have to admit, Baconian is one of my favorites. it's where the actual decryption symbols and words hide what's in it. So typically, the Baconian is a 5-letter alphabet, and it takes 5 symbols in order to represent a single character. Zenecrypt, we're going to have Spanish. In fact, one of the things is, at the regional, there's going to be no more than one in Spanish, but we're generally expecting to see a Zenecrypt on the regional tests. Hill cipher at the regional level, you're only doing a 2x2. You've got the Pollux and the Morbit, which is Morse code ciphertext, and then the new one, the Porta, which is very similar to the Visionaire, but a different table, and then the Rail Fence, which is a positional cipher. So let's talk a little bit about the K1 and K2 on the aristocrats and patristocrats. K1, basically, there's a keyword and a key phrase, and you'll see this a lot. Key phrase, and I'll go a little bit more in examples, but it doesn't have to be a single word. A lot of times, for the keyword, we'll use a 9-letter word that has no repeating letters. That's not going to be the case this year. The letters might repeat, and that means that we're going to drop out the letters. We'll see an example in a minute. But K1 and K2, basically, it's which direction it maps the keyword alphabet. K3, we actually take the same alphabet and map it twice. Now, very importantly, we may ask, instead of asking for the answer for the decryption of the cipher, we're going to instead ask them for the keyword answer. So for example, let's suppose we used a key phrase of, this is a key phrase. Now, this is probably a bad one to use on a test, but it really shows off what happens. When you take this as a key phrase, you throw away any replicated characters. So you can see in this case, I and S is used twice. You've got the E gets used twice, the A gets used twice. And so what you end up is, it would be THISAKEYPR. Now, we would give them an answer block, and you can see the answer block before there, 4 letters, 2 letters, 1, 3, 5 letters. So someone would have to go and figure out what that answer is by looking at it. Well, you can see when you see the this, right, we know that this is going to go in those first 4 letters, and then is, well, how do they know that is there? Well, we could see this A, this AK, well, that doesn't make sense. So we'd have to figure out what previous letters that they would want to pull in. Very, very important. If the keyword answer is requested, 0 mistakes are required for a full credit. So at this point in time, if they dropped out 2 letters, whereas if it was answering with the aristocrat, it would have been full credit. Here they would, with 2 letters, they would have two letters penalty applied to them. Porta. Another new cipher. It is the predecessor to the Visionaire. It's actually where the Visionaire came from. But it's simpler in some respects because there are only 13 different possibilities, and you can see the mapping on the left here. I mean, on the right-hand side here. And one of the important things is when you're decoding the letter, you have to know whether the letter is A to M or N to Z. If it's in the first half of the alphabet, then you pull it from the top. If it's the last half of the alphabet, you pull it from the row. And the nice thing about it is that it is a decode is an encode. There is no decode or encode step. If you take something that's been encoded and you encode it again, you'll actually get the original answer. Very important, we do use the ACA Porta table. There are multiple ways that the Porta table could be constructed, and some of the websites out there do not use this particular table, something to be aware of if you're going to a website to practice. Rail fence. This is a positional cipher. It's the only positional cipher that we have on the test. We've had a lot of success with Division B. We pulled it up to Division C. So we can see this example where if you had TELHERISA and you want to decode it with 3 rails, we got to go figure out, and you would write it in such a way that you get the zigzag, and then you read the answer off in zigzag order. One of the things to be aware of with Division C, there could be an offset. So instead of it starting in the upper left-hand corner, it might start one row down and then repeat in the zigzag pattern. All right, K1 and K2, I think we're already familiar with the K1 and K2. With the K1, it's identified, and you can see that the letter goes and maps. So in this case, the P maps to the L. With a K2, you have, instead, the keyword is in the replacement, and you have to kind of figure out. So we've got the frequency of G's, but then you got to go figure out what the G maps to. K3 is a little bit different. The alphabet is constructed just like the K1 and K2 rules that we have seen, dropping out the letters in the key phrase, but then you shift it in order to make a copy of itself. So when you look at the K3 table, you don't actually see an alphabet in there. But if you figure out what it is, then you can go and shift it to try and figure out what the letters are and to identify the key phrase. But it is two copies of the same alphabet instead of it being a full alphabet on one mapped against a keyword alphabet. And it will be identified by K3. Now, let's talk about the things that teams struggle with. Right off the bat, we've seen plenty of teams that come to the online test and not have practiced it. It is very useful to be familiar with how the online test runs and to understand where you're going to put the answers. I am surprised how many kids don't actually learn the Morse code, or they just simply avoid the Morbit and the Pollux. Well, the Morbit and Pollux are really, really easy ciphers to solve if you understand how the Morse code works. So likewise, the Baconians. Many of the Baconians are really, really simple, and there are teams that have learned to sight read the Baconian alphabet, and they can go very quickly. But where people have a lot of trouble is the Baconian word problems. I call them the headline type problems. You have to understand the mapping of a lot of times what will happen is it's a 5-letter word. We give them a 5-letter hint, and they write those 5 letters underneath the very first 5-letter word. It's not the way it works. Each letter goes under each group of 5. Also see students that don't understand the Visionaire table. This is provided with you on the test. If you understand how to map it, and particularly with the online test, it's a lot easier with the paper because you can slide the hint so that the two are lined up perfectly, and it's very easy to just read through it. Also, not all ciphers are going to be identified on the test, and you need to learn to recognize the different ciphers. There is the ability for one of them to be unidentified, and if you don't know what it is, you might not know how to approach it. We also see a lot of kids that take the extra time try to solve every single letter. Up to 2 is wrong is okay. Take advantage of it where you can. Particularly, for example, if you're doing a 2x2 Hill cipher. If you know you got all the rest of them right, you don't have to do the last one. Also, take advantage of the K1, K2, and K3 alphabet in order to identify missing letters that you haven't figured out. All right, there's lots of resources out there. You're probably already familiar with the Codebusters site. It's got tools for writing exams and solving ciphers. And in fact, if you generate your own exam, when there is the ability to show the solutions for it, it actually gives you hints to how to solve the problem. We've got a little overview of the tool that you can go and look at. Cryptograms.org tutorial has got the best tutorials I've seen for solving aristocrats. It's a commercial website. It's free to go sign up. I highly recommend sending your kids there in order to read the tutorial. They've really done a good job on it. Decode.fr has a lot of good tools for decoding and coding ciphers. Be careful though, some of the defaults of them might not match the particular format that we're using for Codebusters. Quip. It is great place if you really want to solve one. If you can't figure out the answer, we're well aware of it. We'll often put things in to see what it gives to understand how we might tweak the test. And then Gregory Bard has a few practice problems out there, and more importantly, some suggested textbooks if you have some kids that want to go through the textbooks. Lots of sample resources. Tobus.com, Codebusters. Pretty much all the previous tests, any previous tests that I've written and tested and submitted are all put up on the website. You can download them. You can generate electronic versions of them for your team to run. Cryptogram.org is the website for the American Cryptogram Association. If you're looking for even more resources, they put out a 6 times a year newsletter, which has tons of examples to work from. I'll point out I'm a member of the ACA, and we do have ACA members do contribute questions for the test. As I mentioned, cryptograms.org, but there's a lot of aristocrats on there for you to test. I know a lot of kids have practiced on that and get really good at going through them. CryptoClub.org has a bunch of sample ciphers, and if you're looking for quotes as a coach to generate tests, Brainy Quote has a lot of good source of quotes to encode. You might want to make sure you get the length though. Sometimes it can be a little short or a little long. And that's everything that I like to provide for you. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer. You've got my email on there, and I'm wishing you and your team a great day.